Hello everyone, Tone Deaf Monk from the Great White North. How are you today? I am spectacular, and the reason being I am spectacular is I've had a wonderful set of IEMs in my ears. Well, I've had a lot, and this one's taken me a while, so I'm going to talk about the new PENON hybrid, the Dome. And my journey there. So let's start off with a little boring shit, and that'll be the specifications if you're a specificator. I was excited, first of all, just hearing when this one came out. So there's a special recipe of love that I know, if implemented correctly, will make a magical journey for my preferences. And that really had to do with Sonyan balanced armatures, Knowles for high end, and then in this case, what is the X factor? And that happens to be the dynamic driver. So in the Dome, there is now a 10 millimeter PET diaphragm. Impedance of 19 ohms, sensitivity of 107 dB. Pretty straight up across the board. If also, there's some other ones sitting in front of me. The PENON Turbo, which I am going to do a comparison to as well. PENON Fan 2, and the ISN Neo 5. And the reason I'm comparing that is because this PENON is different tuning than every other PENON I've listened to in a good way. It wasn't always at first on my journey, and I'll explain that. And the comparisons to those, and I'm also going to give you some track impressions in this review, so it'll be a bit longer, and I will timestamp it. Again, I would really appreciate a like if, in fact, you do like my video and it's helpful to you. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you much. Now, why do I say that magic sauce for Sonyan BAs and Knowles high-end? Well, first of all, my preferences are I like bassy. I like faster response. I like snappy bass, mid bass. I like tonality, maybe a little bit on the warmer side of neutral. I like my top end to be sparkly, but I do not like too much high end. I find I'm treble sensitive around 7K. 5K peaks don't bother me, but 7 seems to do. So if you have a 6 to 7K dip, I think that's perfect. And if you look at my target curve, that's in there as well. I will pull up a little bit graph here, and you can see that the target curve versus this PENON Dome, how did it compare? And I will do some comparisons later on of how the Neo 5 and the Turbo and Fan 2 hit as well, to give you a bit of an idea. So, how does this thing sound? Well, at first, it did not put me in a happy place. Some IMs, Fan 2, for instance, when I threw this in my ears, I immediately loved it. I loved the entire tuning. I gushed over it. In fact, I was doing a 64 audio U12T review at the same time, and I was having a real hard time pulling the Fan 2 out of my ears. And every time I was listening to a song on the U12T, I would be my brain would go, oh, geez, I wonder what that's going to sound like on the Fan 2. And I just loved its tuning. It's kind of the most neutral PENON to date. And it plays a bit of a part. So if I do a scope of what IMs I have from PENON, for instance, so my best PENON is the 10th anniversary. I really like that I love it a lot. It is probably the most not V-shaped because it's not terribly, but it has the most amount of energy across the board. Excellent bass response, lush mids, high-end frequencies with a little bit of special sauce with the ESTs. Very, very nice. And then the Turbo, which is an all BA set. It's my first all BA set that I've actually truly, truly love, and that I believe that there is true balanced armature bass that can exist. And this one proved it to me. Love that set a lot. I love its ability to sculpt its tuning as well. With the tuning switches, you go from super bassy to super analytical. So it's pretty cool. Definitely worthy of the price tag because of its flexibility. Fan 2, right? Because of its neutrality and its awesome stage. Fit for some people is an issue. And then there's the ISN Neo 5 Bassy Warm set. And somewhere amalgamated into all of that, I said in my initial impressions, if some wild evening the PENON Turbo kind of had a wild night with the Neo 5, its love child would be a product, and its outcome would be the PENON Dome. So I truly believe that even more so now. Starting off in my journey of the Dome, it was not love at first listen like it was with the Fan 2. Now, this was not burned in at this point, and I was listening to it primarily on the Shanling M8 DAP, which is slightly warm. And it was uncomfortably boomy and bloated in the bottom end, and the high end just didn't match up. So after much listening, throwing on some different sources and tips primarily, I ended up going to Tangzhou's Sanchi tips, wide bore, always for me, pressure relieving tips. In some cases, those tips do a wondrous job. In fact, you can see it on the Neo 5, which is still on there, because it has a lot of bass, and I love bass, and I love the mids and highs, and I find that if it's too much bass, then I'm getting old, and I'm not going to say it. It's too much bass. Anyway, snap out of it, monk. It was too much bass at first from the Dome, and so I put these Tangzhou tips, and it calmed it down a bit. And I went, yeah, you know what? That's really closer to my preference, my happy zone, and it really did. And then something happened along the way. So I did my initial impressions like I typically would do, because a lot of people are extremely curious about this. I am. It's coming out at $350, so it's very, very reasonably priced, and extremely competitively priced. I think from what else I've seen, started to bang out at $699, $1,099 for similar configurations or less. And it really isn't about the drivers' count. I think it is about the drivers that are used, the quality of the drivers, and more importantly, the implementation and the tuning. And I think PENON got its magic sauce right on this one, very much. So at first, it wasn't love at first listen. And then through that journey, I put it on the burn rack for about 5 days. And I must have had it on pretty good, because honestly, when I pulled it off of the burn rack, they were quite warm. And I don't know if anybody else has ever noticed that, or maybe I was driving them pretty hard. but they were warm to, yeah, the shells. So we know they can take a torture test then for 5 days straight on. I think they're thoroughly burned in now. And it's a damn good thing that I did, because my impressions today, talking to you in this video, would have been completely different. And it wouldn't have been nearly so positive a review if I would have just stuck him down my ears, listened to him, and gave you my impressions. Because even with the tip rolling and the source rolling, this IM had a different change in personality 100% completely with burn-in with 100 hours. Not going to say you need any more than that, or it could have been less whenever it decided to change, but definitely 5 days on the burn rack at decent volumes certainly changed it. And what changed? Well, it became from a bloated, boomy beast for me to something that went quite magical. And what happened was the bass decided to tame a bit. Either that or the BAs decided to kick in and do their magic sauce. And typically I find balanced armatures don't change a whole lot tonality-wise with burn-in, but I think something happened between the dynamic driver and the BAs or the crossover network inside of this IM to make it change for me completely. So I went back to ASLA short stems. By the way, the fitment of these things is, for me, medium large ears. Absolutely super comfortable. I can listen to these things for hours. Absolutely. They just fit in so beautifully. The shell is very, very nice. It has a little wing on it, not massively big. There, you can kind of see that. So I should also mention these things are absolutely stunning. The clear blue resin, you can see the dynamic drivers, you can see the BAs. Well done, PENON. Maybe change your font. Anyway, fitment, massively comfortable, very great shell shape. The nozzle angle, I wish it was a little bit more shaped to the inside instead of going out, but again, I have no issues with this IM. The plunge audio has spoiled every single IM for me now ever with its fitment, and my understanding now of how these things fit into your ear and your ear canal. These things are still super comfortable, but not like the plunge. And that's especially interesting when I compared it to the Fan 2. It nozzle angle, length, and shape plays a big part in comfort and ultimately your sound impressions as well. So now that I got to a happy place with the fan, with the dome, I started sources, and I'll talk about that. My conclusion, including just before I shot this video, was to go through all of my sources again and absolutely confirm my opinion. And that is the domes, for me, again, this is a subjective subject. I prefer them on a much more resolving source. So listening to it straight off a dongle or a DAP, Shanling's a bit warm. It does sound fantastic, but I think it mutes some of the special sauce that the dome has. And for me, resolving sources. So stack for Ibasso DX170 and the XD05 Pro. absolutely love that combination. And my other stack downstairs in my listening chair with the Gishelli Labs, the 4493 version with the Sparco's Pro op amps in it, the SS2590s, and with a topping A90D. Man, that is magical. It really is. But I love the X Duo and using the Shanley or the Ibasso as a transport. What happens with the dome? Sound impressions. Well, bass now. This one is, again, we'll pull up a graph here. More than probably most other Penons that I have listened to is sub-bass focused. Now, it shows a lot of energy still into the mid-bass. And I'm going to pull up my own measurement here just so when I'm talking to you, I can also kind of relate because you'll see it on the screen, right? I'm sorry for my tardiness. I should have actually done this earlier. But okay, so looking at the dome, you can see it does have a ton of energy down below, and sub-bass focused. And it does have a nice roll into the mid-bass, like straight up into 300. It's got a lot of energy. So it's not too lacking in mid-bass, but you definitely hear the rumble and in the sub-bass. It really is coming out. Now, what concerned me a lot was this big, well, it's a little bit scooped out, honestly, from starts off at about, 250 hertz, and it kind of, scoops out to about 600, more than you would typically, more than my target curve. And I was a bit worried about that it wouldn't play out to my preferences in my slap. I like that fast attack in the mid bass. And do I still wish this dome had a little bit more slam and it wasn't quite so scooped out there? Yes, I do. Absolutely. But that being said, there's a reason, I think, why this Penon dome sounds different from all the other Penons, and it has its own place in the library. It's unique. It created its own space. Is that dip? And when it starts to climb back up with a very, very nice, gentle pin again, and there's a little peak around 4,500 where the top of the pin again kind of climbs, and then it has the slight dip, down at 6 to 7K again. And a very nice top end roll off, like very well, still has great extension. It's a really, really awesome sounding tuning. What happens with that scoop down there, or what happens that I hear in this set? Well, it brings the lushness and the house sound of Penon is famous for in the mids with those Sonyan balanced armatures. And the Knowles BA for the highs is my favorite instead of a Sonyan for the highs. That is magic sauce. I love the sharpness and the clarity and the more resolution of the Knowles BA for the highs. And I love the smooth magicalness of the Sonyan BAs. And what happens here is that little bit of scoop down into the lower bass, mid bass. What I find is it has the lushness and the organicness of the mids, still keeping the tonality of the instruments like cello, and I'll talk about that in some sound impressions. Fantastic. But the clarity of the vocals over something like the Turbo or the Neo 5 or the Fan 2, you can clearly tell it seems to have higher resolution. And I just love the way it has that perfect combination for me of lushness and resolution in the mids. And where most of the information that we listen to is in the mid-range details, this is the most important part. Going back to the lowest octaves, that bass now, for me, this driver that's in here is very nice. It has that kind of organic bassness that is like a big ported home speaker, right? It has that naturalness, effortlessness. That's a good way to describe it. It can do the lowest notes without breaking a sweat. Like I said, when it transitions to the mid bass, there is lots of that energy there. Is this the fastest, snappiest driver? No, that is probably more of the Fan 2 with the dual 6mm drivers coming into play. But there's no lacking here, and when there's snap and attack in the bass, it is there, and it's an authority. When this thing finally burned in, it really balanced out nicely. More so than the graph would indicate. I mean, it looks almost very V-ish or W-shaped tuning signature, but it doesn't sound like the graph. You really need to put ears on this one. There is a few IMs that don't sound like they graph on paper, so if you're a measures debater, then you're not going to get what this thing really sounds like. Speaking of what it really sounds like, let's talk about track impressions, right? How did it sound on some of my favorite tracks? And I don't do this for every review, time-wise, but this one's definitely worth your time to do. So let's start off with a little EDM, a little Boris Blank. I'm listening for How Low Can You Go? And bass goes low. Very. Loved it. Does it have that EDM slap and attack? No, because of the bass driver in this case has a slower decay. So it doesn't have that super fast release on the attack. It has more of a organic droning. Not quite as fast, but definitely musical sounding. And that's what I found super appealing about it. So track D from Ozzy Osbourne, listening to the finger slides and the nuances, the Dome does it exceptionally well. The finger slides are easy to pick up, the plucks. But more importantly, what really impressed me was the note weight, how natural and organic it really sounded in the bottom end. And this was an interesting one versus the turbo. In that BA bass, the turbo sounded lean and missing some micro details. The dynamic driver kicks ass for bass, in my opinion. No no balanced armature can match up with a dynamic driver for bass. Doesn't happen. Never heard it. The turbo is wonderful, but nope, it doesn't do dynamic driver bass like this does. In Too Deep by Drake, right? I'm listening for how does the bass drone? Does it do this kind of music? Yeah. Absolutely. Bass droning, very nice hits. And I just love the balance. I mean, it's okay to have a bassy IM as long as the rest of it can keep up, right? Sort of versus the turbo. The turbo hits the notes, but the BA bass doesn't sustain like the dynamic driver of the Dome. Vocals are more pronounced, like on a turbo, because of the less bass. And at first, before break-in, I thought the turbo sounded more natural, but after doing again more and I love the turbo by the way for its vocal presentation. I think I prefer the dome over in the vocal presentation part of it, and that had to do with more of the note weight and the tonality of the vocals. Let's do a little rock. In Too Deep, Sum 41. Guitars, they sound so great. Bass pounds, definitely bass heavy in this track, but the mids and the highs keep up beautifully. Makes it a really, really wicked genre to sound. Rock, yeah, absolutely. Turbo, nice impact again, more balanced. Vocal clarity was better, but overall presentation, I'll take the dome. Rolling in the Deep by Adele. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm a big female vocal fan. And she's got a deep voice too. So on the dome, here where I found like vocals are very natural, very nice tonality, and the weight. What I noticed on the dome, which was, and I love hearing things differently with different IMs, and where something stands out, and what stood out from all the stuff on my desk and all the stuff I've been listening to lately was that I could hear the backup singers. And it's kind of interesting going from the Neo 5, which I didn't hear, the turbo you did, but not to this detail, and then the fan 2, which you got too, but because of the lower octaves of the backup singers and the way it's presented, you couldn't pick them out as nice. And where the dome did this the absolute best. And just a little bit of comparison back and forth with the turbo. Adele's vocals sound thinner, but on the dome I think they sound more natural. In that case. Sia, so another female vocalist, Cellophane. Again, I really love the extra weight to her vocals. It gets, before Burnin', it was getting a little too close to too much. And that changed everything after that Burnin'. Again, with the versus the turbo had great vocals, really nice. I love that. Micro details are fantastic. Highs come through with more details with the turbo, but when you switch back to the dome, again after Burn-In, it really kind of, I don't know, came to life. The BAs really came to life, and I really like the way it. I'm not going to say it balanced out, but it almost sounds like that. Again, with probably that lower scoop out in the lower, at that 300 to 500 area, it just brought up the vocals in a really rich way. Let's switch over to some Vivaldi, shall we? And I'm trying to listen to this track, Cello Concerto Movement Number 1. And I want to listen to how well does it going to do string instruments, and especially string instruments that play in the lower octaves. And big smile, honestly. So versus turbo, the strings, upper strings, have more energy. They come across with more liveliness, but the dome sounds better with cello. If I were a upper string specialist and I wanted to listen to violin, the turbo might be my choice, but the dome does it with more microdynamics and the excellent transients between the soft and loud passages. That's what really, really stood out for me on the dome. And excellent image placement. There was one thing about the dome is the stage. it allows instruments to play in its own space, kind of a rarity, where you do get a definite, massively wide left, right, and center. And it plays in its own space. Instrument playing over here, instrument playing over here. You can tell where it is on the stage, and center still keeps you focused as well. A little I Want to Be Your Slave by Manskin. The impact. I love this one. And again, this one has more mid-bass track than sub-bass. And again, prior to Burn In, my initial impressions were it had bleed into the vocals. After Burn In, none of that. In fact, it sounds wonderful after that. Versus, again, Turbo, clean bass again, no bass bleed at all in the Turbo. But the weight in the vocals are getting close to the two, but the Dome has the edge for male vocals. More rock. My Ex's Best Friend by Machine Gun Kelly. Sweet guitar drops, fun, energetic. Love rock and this kind of genre for the Dome. Again, versus Turbo, bass in there, but it doesn't go as low. And again, it's more balanced with the Turbo, with the settings that I did anyway, which was Turbo button off, and then second bass boosted button on. Less bass in the Turbo, of course. Vocals come through cleaner on the Turbo, but again, I love the tonality, more naturalness of the Dome over the Turbo in that case. What happens now after Burn In? Another Brick in the Wall by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. So here, I got to tell you that the 10th anniversary does, and that's what I said in my review, micro and macro dynamics off the hook. Fantastic. Standout feature. The Dome, I think, keeps up to that. Same impressive level, except where the 10th anniversary will edge it out because of that EST extra little in the top end, where, I mean, the 10th anniversary is worth it as the upgrade, but the Dome at its $350 price point is punching up there for sure. Overall balance between the bass, the instrumental, and the vocals in this track is fantastic. Nothing's too much, nothing's too little. Everything is playing in a way that makes it a very engaging listen. Let's go back to some more. Concerto for Two Cellos in G Minor by Azir Polo. I am not a massive classical fan. I do appreciate good music and well-recorded music. But honestly, I will tell you, strings are bliss on the Dome. They really are. I could listen to classical music on the Dome all day without fatigue. I just love the emotion that the Dome puts into the music. It brings in the tracks to life. Cello, the extra bass energy in the cello are wonderful. Not overdone, not undercooked, right? The Goldilocks, for sure. All strings, I thought, played beautifully with the Dome. Dreams of Reason by the Tea Party. Now this one has, again, back to rock. So I'm switching from classical rock. It has an electric cello at the beginning. Okay, and this was an interesting moment. The melodramatic vocals, first of all, are absolutely mesmerizing, and the stage space and the way you can hear the reverberation, I thought was extremely well done. But that electric cello and its details. So the the bottom half of this, anybody who I'm gonna say for impressions, at least for me. Well, sorry, Kilo's making weird noises over there. The ISN Neo 5. I can't hear it. The specialness of that electric cello, like it didn't wow me. Once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it, and then I went back to the turbo, and the turbo didn't play it as well. It was like completely missing. The fan too, completely missing. It just didn't have the note energy, the weight energy that the dome has. And it just really brought that to life. And it was like a wow moment of going, damn, these things are pretty impressive, right? That was just some track impressions. And as I was doing it, all my friends are here. Another one I'm going to talk about with Joe Satriani. And in there, around 2 minutes or so, he has ascending A major on his 7-string guitar. He's an amazing artist. It did an excellent job of that. And that's not an easy replay to do. It's not an easy replay to play, and it's a harder one to actually pick up, and it did it fantastically. So micro nuances, details, and tonality is what stood out on the dome for me. Great resolution, again, is probably a standout feature of this dome. Overall, versus, okay, PENON dome versus turbo. I think the turbo is definitely a more balanced IM, more so than the dome. The dome is a more colored IM when it comes to the bottom end. Same as the fan too, right? But the bass on the dome is extremely organic, very natural, old school bass. Attack and decay is excellent. Do I wish this driver was speedier in the mid bass? I'm going to say yes again to that, because that's my preference. But do I wish it? I don't know. Not if it messes up what it does to vocals. Don't touch it, right? Because it's special that way, and it's different from all the other ones that I have, and it puts a special place. Mids come through so natural in the mix with the dome. At first, before burn-in, my initial impressions, I thought it was slightly biased towards a warmer tonality. And then after burn-in, I thought it went to very neutral sounding. Vocals were very natural. They weren't forward in the mix. They weren't recessed. And the tonality of the mid-range is excellent. So male vocals didn't have too much weight. It wasn't too warm or it wasn't too dark. The PENON Globe, for me, another special IM. Ultimately, I sold it because it was too warm and too dark for me. And even though I EQ'd it to bring up the top end, and I didn't want to EQ anymore, it wasn't, it's a lovely IM, but it was too dark and warm. Where if I still had that, and I'm just going off of now memory, I would say this one probably has a lot of that DNA, but then all of this special sauce of the Sonyan BAs and Knowles High that brings this thing to life in the top end, where if I were EQing the Globe, it would have gotten to where this dome is. So again, Bass bleeds were happening before break-in, kind of boomy. After post, I don't hear any bleed into the vocals. In fact, it kind of changed where the BAs kicked in, and it went to super clean. Now, tips are also going to play a big part in your journey, and as I do, I spend the time and effort to play around and to get it the way. I thought, again, pre-burn-in, that there was a lot of colorization into the vocals, into the mids, and post-break-in there was none, I found. Again, using a less warmer source, a more resolving source like the ESS DAC and the XD05 Pro, definitely played a big part in there too. I can't stress that enough, where a more resolving source, if I didn't bring this point to life earlier, a more resolving source brings the dome to life. Oh, that was my next point. There you go. A more resolving source also, especially what I noticed was, I love this thing on this XD05 Pro. The bass is fast, and because it's less warm, I just found the resolution and the attack. Remember I said earlier that I wish it had a bit more snap and attack. Well, listening to it on this source, it got me 95% there. So when I listen to the domes, am I putting it on that stack? Absolutely. Versus now Fan 2. Somebody asked me, can you compare this to the Fan 2? The note weight on the dome is clearly more pronounced on the dome, and sub bass and rumble and is there. Where the Fan 2 sounds drier, it sounds less dynamic. I think it's still more balanced, better for female vocals if that's your priority on the Fan 2. But overall, the dome tonality, like male vocals, lower string instruments. Perfect example, going back to that Tea Party song, again, it sounded good on the Fan 2, but you just missed all the... There wasn't that wow factor, the special sauce of the Fan 2, but when I played that song and that instrument, the electric cello on the dome, it was like you can't help yourself but not put a big smile on your face to hear something that you haven't heard before in one of your favorite sets. So my over the two sets, the dome plays male and female vocals beautifully. Now, is that because it throws in an extra Sonyan BA in the mids? Probably, and a little bit of that scoop out in the lower bass to bring up the mid focus? Yeah, probably. But I just love the more bass energy of the dome and how low, much lower it goes. Even though I love rumble and slam, the dome is just super engaging. I think the vocals sound cleaner. Again, on the dome versus the Fan 2. And that's high praise. As much as I really love the Fan 2, it's probably going to get shelved because I just love the way the dome presents better. Versus the Neo 5. So... Again, in the dome, you have a bit of a scooped out mid bass. In the Neo 5, it's thicker. And they have, interesting in the top part, have a little bit of scoop out between the 6 and 7K as the sibilance dip. But I didn't miss that dip in the dome, and not at all. It's not sibilant, bright, harsh, glary, add volumes, I must add. But if you like more mid bass and you like more bass in total. The Neo 5 is yours at the sacrifice of resolution, clarity, details, proper tonality. It's a warmer replay. Not as much high frequency energy in the top end. So that's the way the Dome sounded. It was a less warm, less thick mids. It sounded cleaner with the without all that extra mid bass. Definitely has less bass than the Neo 5. Definitely more high frequency energy. I think that comes through on the Dome, even though on a graph, the Neo 5 looks like it would have more, but because it has more bass, you don't hear it as much. The top end of the Dome actually sounds smoother, more natural, more organic on the Dome versus the Neo 5 as a comparison. So just to wrap this video up, yeah, I loved it a lot. Again, it wasn't love at first listen, but it certainly is now after I've gave it some time. A couple other things to note, and I know some people aren't cable believers. On higher resolution sets and gear that you have as you go up, you might not hear a difference, right? If you're playing on a really inexpensive dongle, even the Truthier Shiro, one of my favorite little dongles, swapping cables didn't make that much of a difference, not at all. It wasn't until you go into a more resolving source like the XD05 or the downstairs Gishelli stack with the Sparkos. When I cable swap with those sources, it makes a big difference. What I ended up with, the stock cable is great because it's an SPC, it's soft. I don't use it a lot because they don't have ear hooks, and I'm a big fan of ear hooks. I think you can request that now. I think PENON is changing that, where you can request ear hooks, and it'd probably make me use the stock cables because I think they're perfectly nice and they're fine. My journey with this one, just so you know, what I ended up with was medium large Osla short stem. I like this tip a lot. It's kind of got a medium firm, so it on the outside, so it keeps the bass energy in. Again, I want to keep it in. I'm liking the fact that what had happened to the bottom end now. And I put it on a pure silver and palladium cable. No copper in this bad boy. And I was worried about bass. But again, maybe that's why it balances off so nicely, where it kind of exemplifies the mids and the top end. And wonderful. Over an SPC cable, I think it, for me, brought the Dome to life with a more resolving source. I'm really loving my long listening sessions with the Dome with that. So, I don't know if I mentioned that I'm going to jump into the conclusion here. So, let's go do that. Overall sound, yeah, bassy, organic, lush, natural mids that have clarity and resolution, top tier. Sparklies and twinklies in the top registers without ESTs, but makes a very fatigue-free listening session. Still has all that high energy, still have string instruments that sound, dare I say, perfect for me. Yes, they absolutely do. The tonality, which is more important to me than anything else, is how does it come across to sound natural to me, how I think they should sound, and it does a phenomenal job. It checks off all the boxes, and I love this uniqueness of this PENON tuning. Again, it's different from the 10th anniversary. It's different from the Turbo. It's different from the Fan 2. It's different from the ISN Neo 5. It's different from the Soundrhyme gear as well, which kind of goes into warmer mid-bassy stuff too. Like I said, I think the Dome has its own place. It's unique in the PENON world, and it's extremely well priced, in my opinion, for what you get, an overall package, and its naturalness. PENON, you did a great job. Hate to sound like a shill. You know, there has been a few PENON that, like I said, the Globe I haven't kept. The Serial didn't wow me. The Fan 2 wowed me. The Turbo wowed me. The 10th anniversary wowed me, and the Dome now has wowed me. So I don't impress that easily. Honestly, I get a chance to listen to a lot of IMs and high-end stuff. And this one's special for me. I'm probably going to retire the Fan 2, as I love it that much. And yeah, that's enough of my impressions of the Dome. I hope I've shared what I thought of it to give you honest impressions of my thoughts on this bad boy. So, thanks much. This is Tone Deaf Monk. I'm out for now.